Morning, everybody. Welcome to the Prosperity and Livability Committee meeting today. I'll call the meeting to order. In chamber today, we have Cyril Jefferson. I'm Wesley Hudson, Chair. Michael Holmes, are you with us?
I am.
Councilman Holmes is remote. And Monica Peters, are you with us this morning?
She is not with us yet.
She is not with us yet, but hopefully we'll be checking in. We have one item on the agenda this morning, and that's to discuss some traffic calming at the Laurel Oaks community. So I will pass it over to either Randy McCaslin or Matt Carpenter.
Okay, Matt's going to kind of give you an update on where we are and a little history with this project. I've handed out to you, and for those not present, we'll get a copy and put it in their mailbox for them if they wish. We have both the old policy and the newer revised policy, traffic calming policy, and we have a copy of the agreement for this particular project at Laurel Oak Ranch that was done in 2012. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt and let Matt kind of give you a little history on the project.
Okay, before you start, Matt, Councilwoman Peters, are you with us now?
Yes.
You are. Thank you. So all are present. Matt Carpenter, thank you, sir.
Yes, this is Matt Carpenter, Transportation Department. The background on the traffic calming in Laurel Oak Ranch goes back to 2010. We were contacted then by the HOA, and we've tried a couple things. Initially, we put down white edge lines inset from the existing curb and gutter by about 8 feet along the run of Old Plank Road from, I'm drawing a blank on the first street.
Hedgecock.
It was
Is it from Hedgecock?
It wasn't quite from Hedgecock. It's from the next street in, down around to Evans Mill, I think. And that didn't really seem to do anything. So we moved to the next part of our policy, which at that time that we enacted this, that was a draft policy that we had. So the draft policy that we had in place for traffic calming at that point basically put the requirement on the HOA to pay for anything that got done. So when we looked at treatments that we could put on Old Plank Road, we felt like a horizontal shift, something that moved the traffic horizontally as opposed to vertically, would be more appropriate in consultation with police, fire, EMS, other TRC members. So we finally settled on the mini traffic circles at Hitchcock and Younger Place. Now those were done. Everything was completed on that, and around the petitions and whatever were completed around 2012. The actual installation was 2013, 2014 timeframe. So those have been in place for going on six and a half years. All the studies that we've conducted show that they are having some effect. They're having some positive effect. Initially, we had all kinds of issues with complaints about they were not signed properly. They were not marked properly. None of that was true. They were signed properly. They were marked properly. There was just a decent percentage of the community that didn't like them. They still don't like them, and that's fine. Not everyone's going to like everything, but everything that I had heard in the interim from the folks in between the two traffic circles, the folks that had requested them, they were okay with them. They seemed to be doing a decent job, or they thought they were. Seems like maybe that's changed at this point. But based on our current traffic studies, it still seems like those are effective traffic control devices. So here we are today. They've made a request to take them out. Now they meet the requirement in both policies as far as the time frame. They've been in more than 3 years, so that works. The old policy would require that the HOA pay to take them out, 100% of the cost. And then I believe is it 2 or so years? Let's see, once the device has been removed, you have to wait a minimum of 2 years from the date of removal before you're eligible to put anything else in. And I think that's mirrored in the new policy. The big change is the new policy would allow us to spend city funds, assuming they're available, to take them out. And I reckon that's the big question is, if they meet all the criteria for taking them out, who pays for them? And the only thing I could add to that is, it seems like they're still effective. They're still doing what they were meant to do. We can't recommend taking them out based on that. Now, council can do what they need to do, but our engineering opinion is they're doing what they're supposed to do. There's absolutely no engineering reason why they should come out. So I can answer any other questions you have, or what else you need me to do.
Okay. I can fill you in a little bit more. One of the complaints that they have now is that rather than going around the traffic circle, people are simply going to the left to turn left.
They've been doing that since day one.
And I don't know a way that we can
Right.
prevent that.
Yeah. The one thing I would add, the old policy was 2 years for putting anything else in, and the new policy is 3 years. So we added a year in the case that we would take these out. We would need to wait 3 years before they're eligible to put anything in. And I will say that, yes, based on my observation, and I saw it again this morning, saw a pickup truck come up on Hitchcock Way, and he looked and saw nothing was coming, and he rolled to the left of the circle and right on out. It's a low speed residential street, low volume. Is that bad? Is it preferred? No. But I saw the majority of the folks making the proper movements around those circles. They're doing what they're supposed to do. But I will say, yes, we've had that problem with people going left of them since they were put in. So I was going to measure it and I forgot. It's on the order of about 38 feet wide.
It's very wide.
It's a very wide street.
Extremely wide for a,
Yes.
right. Now, old policy, a lot of the who is going to pay for it has to do with very specific wording. And in the old policy, I believe it uses the word the city may remove them. And I think we put that in there. I think the initial intent of that was if the city wanted to remove them, the city would pay to remove them.
Yeah.
If the city said they're ineffective or that they're even dangerous.
Yes.
And there has been one fatality there, but that was I believe that was a scooter that somebody that was
The details on that are he was under the influence,
right,
not wearing a helmet.
not wearing a helmet.
And we had multiple warning signs and multiple warning devices in place. The DUI contributed to that. That was 100% the contributing factor there. So, yeah.
So I believe our wording says that the city may remove them, which legally means we have a right to remove them if we find them ineffective. But if the homeowners association asks to remove them, they pay for them.
Yes.
That's my interpretation.
Yes.
Now, the homeowners association I'm sure they would prefer the city to pay. If the homeowners association pays to remove them, do we still have to wait the 3 years?
Well, if we're going to apply the old policy, that time frame would be 2 years.
Even if the homeowners association pays to remove them, we still have to wait 2 years?
That's in the old policy.
Okay.
So my take on that would be, if we choose to apply the old policy, then we apply the old policy. They would wait 2 years and then they would get in line behind everyone and follow the new policy at that point. So that's perfectly valid.
Okay.
If we choose to do something different, then that may be perfectly valid as well. But then if we choose to follow the new policy, then it's a 3-year waiting period. So I don't know that they come out any better.
And at this point, I'd just like to remind the committee that due to our budget constraints this year with the COVID hurting the economy, our funding for traffic calming measures was cut in half for the year. And we have already presented at either your last meeting or the meeting before last, the new projects that have met the criteria and that we are currently out for bids on. And we expect that to eat up at least 100% and probably more of the available funding for this year.
Okay. So if Laurel Oaks chooses to leave the roundabouts in place, they can still apply for new traffic calming. You can still proceed that way. If they want to leave the islands in place and do further calming, they can choose that route, which is basically on-street parking and.
Well, okay, so there's a couple things going on with that. In 2010, we made the decision to just do horizontal maneuver around something. We could see about adding some additional horizontal changes. I don't know that either transportation or fire would support any sort of vertical, any sort of traffic, any sort of speed hump or anything like that, simply because emergency response times are an issue, especially considering that that is the main way in and out for the bulk of that subdivision. Yes, I think that they would be eligible to get in line under the new policy and proceed that way. Yes, they could do that. It's still, I think we're looking at 2 years before we're able to actually do anything just based on funding. So that's why our recommendation, and that's partly why our recommendation is leave the things in place, because they do seem to have an effect. We don't have the money. I don't know that they have the money either. And if they come out, they're a minimum of 3 years under the new policy. They're a minimum of 3 years before anything could go back. I just feel like you're cutting off your nose to spite your face at that point. It's just not, it doesn't make sense.
One further point to make is that our engineering department has provided us with a wind chill estimate, if you will, without going to any contractors. And we're looking at about $15,000 to remove the 2 traffic circles and repair the pavement accordingly.
We still do have the option of maybe a center island in certain spots, or bringing the side of the street in with on-street parking and some curbing.
Yeah, if you remember the meeting that we had with the homeowners association, they indicated that they wanted the traffic circles removed, but they would like some traffic calming measure put back in its place. They felt like that was needed. I think that is going to require another study by our transportation people. They can come up with a number of options, whatever they may be at that point. I think Matt made an excellent point on the vertical types of traffic calming measures. They do have an impact on our emergency vehicles. Our fire department is very wary of them because they do slow down response times. And when you're dealing with medical calls, especially, response time is judged in seconds to be effective, not minutes. So that's a concern that the fire department has and has expressed recently, even about the new projects that have come in to be that are out to bid right now. So before we were able to talk about any new measures, I think transportation would need to take a look at a number of options. We'd have to work with the fire department and other emergency responders and try to come up with some options to present back to the committee and the homeowners association.
Right. That street is wide enough though for horizontal.
Yes.
Yeah.
The other thing I
still
would
have
say about
emergency.
on-street parking is that's not prevented right now. On-street parking is allowed right now, and we encourage it everywhere as much as we can. So if they choose not to park on street, there's not much we can do with that. So I reckon I need a little bit of direction. So you say about a follow-up study. Yes, we would, if what we would like is some direction from council if they're to follow the new policy or the old policy. And then if we're going to follow the new policy, then we would do that. We would take the steps in the new policy and relook at everything over the next year or so, however long it takes to collect that data and go through that policy. But regardless, I think we're 2 years away from being able to do anything just based on funding. So
When I say on-street parking, I mean extending the curb out into the roadway.
and that's all possible.
Which
Yes.
is
Yes, that's all possible.
at a
There is a cost. Yes.
Of course.
There is a cost, yes, sir.
Yeah, the fear with on-street parking is that you're going 40 miles an hour and you have one car sitting on the side of the road. That's their concern. But there is nothing preventing them from starting the process under the new policy. if they
No,
want
there's
further
nothing prevents them
measures.
from doing that. No, sir.
Okay. And that's what I will probably go back to them with.
Okay.
Any questions from you, Ms. Jefferson?
No, I mean, I think it's pretty cut and dry. We're not in a position, I think, to go outside of what we probably think is best practice right now. If the HOA feels that they're able to do it, then maybe that's another conversation. And we see where they land financially. In regards to whether we use old or new policy to dictate, knowing that the priority right now is funding, but if we're looking at policy next after that, depending on the timing of the project, you may have stated that already. But if we grandfather in folks based on when the project was done, if the old policy was in place, but
You're only talking about a difference of a year as far as the policy goes in saying, okay, if you pay to take them out now, the waiting period is 2 years before we look at doing anything else. That doesn't mean we can't study it in the interim and have something ready to go. It just means you're going to wait. That was part of the thing, is so that other communities, other areas of town could have a fair chance at that money. So that's where that
I
comes
agree.
from.
I agree.
Mhm.
Just I'm sure Wesley will keep us surprised whatever phone calls it gets.
Yeah, this is a very active community. I talk to them often, so.
One thing that I would suggest, and this is the conversation I've had with lots of folks in these communities, is they're the ones doing the speeding. It's not folks coming in from outside. It's their homeowners that are doing this. And that's what I try to remind folks is, if you know Joe down the street, if you know Susie up the street, hopefully you're not as likely to speed past their house. And that's what I encourage people, is get out and meet your neighbor and have a conversation and try to just be respectful of people. That's really what it comes to. And then we wouldn't necessarily have to have this. So.
Okay. Councilman Holmes, you have any questions for Mr. Carpenter?
I do not. I think it's pretty, as Councilman Jefferson said, pretty cut and dried. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Peters?
No, I think Matt covered it pretty well.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Yes, sir.
And I have nothing further on the agenda. If anyone has anything else. Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you, Manager McCaslin. So I have the privilege of having with me today, and Councilman Hudson, or Chairman Hudson, actually, I appreciate you providing space and opportunity for it. Mr. Hamza Al-Qadir, who is in the 11th grade at High Point Central High School, reached out maybe a month ago and said that he was interested in local government, said that the events of this year maybe caused him to take a little more notice of what goes on in our community. And said he wants to learn a little bit more. So he reached out, said he wanted to shadow. His principal approved it. Their career development coordinator approved it. And so we met and talked. And it fell on this very lucky day in which he gets to come in and attend this meeting. And we'll do a few other meetings today with a few more folks. So Hamza, thank you for being here. Did you want to have any words for everyone here?
Wonderful. Glad that you're here. Welcome. If there is nothing further, if there is no objection, then I will say that we are adjourned.